This is Murderous Minors, Killer Kids, bringing you a fresh news story of the evil deeds that kids can do. Kindergarten through 12th grade murderers. True stories thoroughly researched. Join us weekly for new tales of parents' worst nightmares on Murderous Minors, Killer Kids. Episode number 6, Rage Untamed.
Jim, it seems so out of place to see a little boy standing in front of a judge accused of murder here at the Duval County Courthouse. But today, 12-year-old Cristian Fernandez kept quiet as lawyers on both sides argued his case.
It's a very unique case. There's a lot of special circumstances that we have to deal with when dealing with the Cristian Fernandez case, and it's the state of Florida's hope that we can resolve this case short of a trial. I think that would be in the best interest of all parties.
If convicted, Fernandez could spend life in prison.
Biannela Susana described her birth country of the Dominican Republic as paradise, a loving environment that her mom came back and moved her from at the age of 8. She fondly recalls 3-tiered birthday cakes and being taught to swim by her dad who lived across the street from where her grandmother and aunt raised her. In Miami, she was alone most of the time, neglected by a mother who increasingly found herself under the influence. A mother who drank, threw dishes, and had the first police report filed against her in 1996 when Biannela was 10 after leaving her at school past dark. By age 11, Biannela had met Jose Antonio Fernandez, the 17-year-old brother of a friend. In a June 2011 interview, Jose, then 31, said that she often came around to see him and that she seemed to be in need of attention and love. She said in 2013 that he was the first person to make her feel special since her grandmother, and that she had no problem doing whatever he wanted. That same year, she became pregnant. Both Jose and her mother thought it best if she didn't keep the baby, but Biannela was determined. She felt that the baby would always be there to keep her company. She was tired of being alone and lonely. On January 14th, 1999, she gave birth to Cristian Fernandez, with no H to be more interesting, when she was just a child of 12 years old herself. It doesn't appear that any social service agencies stepped in to make sure that she and her newborn had an adequate home, a safe environment where an adult was present to make sure they were properly cared for. Shortly after Cristian's birth, his biological father, Jose Fernandez, was prosecuted for statutory assault of a child. He was able to avoid prison by convincing the court that he would stick around to raise his son, a promise he loosely keeps until Cristian is 7. He was sentenced to 10 years probation and required to register as a sex offender. Her mother did not allow her to return back to middle school, so she stayed home day after day to care for Cristian when she was not even really old enough to care for herself yet. When he was 2 years old and his mother 14, he was found dirty and naked, wandering outside a motel in Miami in the middle of the night. His grandmother, who was supposed to be watching him while Biannela stayed the night at a friend's house, was found drunk inside the motel with cocaine in her purse. She was charged with child neglect and given a case plan by Florida Department of Family and Child Services. By the following year, she'd moved them all into a mobile home which had no running water or electricity. Still not in school, the kids stayed there all day alone until someone finally reports the neglectful situation. Biannela insisted on accompanying him, now 4 years old, into foster care, and they were placed in a group home. By 16 years of age, Cristian's mom begins to get her life back together, getting tutoring and completing her GED, working at KFC to save money to move out, as well as mastering the Miami public transit system. And then, when Christian is 5 years old, according to a 2004 DFC report, Biannela walks into the room he shared with two older boys to find him being sexually assaulted. She got permission to move him in with her, and he began counseling. At this time, a now 17-year-old Biannela was noted to be a caring mom who needed to be more stern. They say she had a hard time making decisions, that she was easily overwhelmed emotionally and prone to spend too much time ruminating over a situation. None of these attributes can now be considered surprising, considering what we know about how and when the adolescent brain matures. When she's 18 and ages out of the system, they have enough money to get a car in their own place, and they leave the group home with Biannela promising her 6-year-old son that he would never have to worry about being put in foster care again. She soon begins dating a man who works at the gas station and gives Christian candy. His name was Luis Galarraga Blanco, a former minor league baseball player originally from Venezuela. They married at the courthouse when Biannela was 19 and Luis 26, and Christian's father, Jose Fernandez, ended up using the marriage and Luis's bad temper as reasons to step back from Christian's life around 2006. He said he didn't want to get in the way of them being a family. In the summer of 2005, Biannela and Luis had their first son together, followed by a daughter in 2006. Christian went to the Dominican Republic and lived with Biannela's beloved grandmother, whom he had never met, while he was 10 years old. He returned to an apartment occupied by 2 adults, 2 toddlers, and a freshly newborn David. At this point, he is remembered as quiet and withdrawn and responsible for all the adult chores around the house, according to neighbors. An increasingly volatile domestic violence situation was taking place behind closed doors. Family members later testified as to the explosiveness and volatility of Luis's temper towards all of the children. It was volatile enough that Christian's biological father, Jose, had stepped back, not willing to step up when he saw Luis come close to striking his son, thinking it best that there be only one man calling the shots. It all came to a shocking crescendo on October 22, 2010, when Christian arrived at Jose Marti Academy School in Hialeah, Florida, with a horrifically suspicious bruised and swollen eye. School officials would learn that his stepfather, Luis, had punched him, accusing him of getting dressed in front of his 3-year-old half-sister. Christian was taken to the hospital with retinal damage, along with several broken ribs, while his parents and Department of Family and Children were called to the school. His mother appeared at the meeting as requested. However, his stepfather refused. Police attempted to reach him by phone to no avail. They go to the family's apartment in an attempt to investigate the child abuse claim, but he doesn't answer the door. Finally, the 3-year-old girl opens the door for police, and they follow her little bloody footprints to the back bedroom, where 2-year-old David is found covered in blood. Police then discover that Luis Galarraga Blanco has taken his own life by shooting himself in front of the younger children. He's found deceased with a 9mm handgun in his hand, his youngest 2 children present in the room. It was reported that Galarraga Blanco committed suicide to avoid possible prosecution for the child abuse, but also for potential sexual assault. Multiple doctors who examined Christian cited indicators of long-term sexual abuse. Neighbors at the Hialeah apartment told reporters that the very next day, Christian was seen loading all the family's belongings into their car. His mother had quit her job and promptly moved the family to Jacksonville. She had a stepsister there, but she was busy with her own life, so it's reported that she frequently relied on Christian to babysit his 3 younger siblings at their new apartment. According to Department of Family and Children, the agency had signed the family up to receive whatever furniture they might need for their new home, but more importantly, counseling was initiated. Cristian had an appointment scheduled for 6 weeks or so away in December of 2010, but they didn't make it. So then they were put on a waiting list for a January appointment when Cristian came in from the park. He was carrying 2-year-old David and said he fell off the jungle gym hurting his leg. His little leg was badly swollen. He wasn't crying, but he wouldn't stand on it or even attempt to walk. Biannela doesn't necessarily believe the jungle gym story, and she has legitimate concerns about her children being put into foster care. That was her worst nightmare given her past experience with the system. She waits about 2 days before taking David to the hospital, where she is told by doctors that it's the worst break on a toddler they'd ever seen. She asked her oldest son again what happened, and he responded with, "I told you." But he does eventually admit that while roughhousing around with the toddler, he maneuvered his little leg into some kind of yoga-like pose. Regardless of what she told the doctors, they didn't believe her, given the severity of the injury. The Department of Family and Children was notified, the report stating that Biannela should be evaluated to determine what kind of services would be helpful for her family. Cristian got a counseling appointment for February 23rd of 2011, but they didn't make it to that one either. David was still sporting a blue cast from his hip to his toes a few weeks later on the morning of March 14th. Their mom leaves him and his sister with Cristian to take their 5-year-old brother to kindergarten. The toddlers are asleep and Biannela rushes off, stopping at the bank on her way back. Before she completed her errands, however, she received a call from Cristian telling her that little David had fallen off the top bunk. He was unconscious and bleeding. She rushed home and Cristian went to school. David is completely unconscious, lying on the bed with blood trickling from his nose. His mom cleaned him up and changed his diaper and changed him out of his pajamas. She put an ice pack on his head, waved rubbing alcohol under his nose, and begged him to wake up. She spent the next hours intermittently searching the internet for topics such as concussion, coma, and when someone gets knocked out. By the time Cristian returns from school, his mom had packed a bag with snacks for when David woke up. She was prepared to take him to the hospital, where they arrived at around 5:25 p.m. Doctors demand to know why she waited so long to bring him in, and he was airlifted to Shands Jacksonville Hospital's trauma unit immediately. Reports state that there was no eye movement, no body movement, and his eyes were rolled back, the blue cast still stretching from hip to toes. She lies about the source of little David's broken leg and had told Cristian to lie as well. They stuck to the jungle gym story for the time being. While they were at the hospital, Cristian was questioned by police, who arrived to search the scene around 11:30 p.m. Video-recorded interrogations take place over the next 23 hours, with Cristian eventually describing having struck David's head 2 times against the bookshelf. He said he wasn't even thinking about David when he did it. He was thinking about himself and about Luis Galarraga Blanco. He was angry. He had been thinking about him and what he'd done to him for a few days now. They used a doll, and Cristian eventually showed the detective how he and David had been roughhousing and how he had bent his leg until it broke. He said he stopped when David cried. He brought him to his mom. He asked if his brother didn't wake up, did that mean he wouldn't make it? And if the doctors could wake him up. He acknowledged that what he did was wrong. He said he felt bad as soon as he realized what he had actually done and told his mom. The detective then asked Cristian if he babysat a lot, and he said that he did. Cristian was arrested for aggravated child abuse, and the following day, David died from blunt force trauma injuries, including a skull fracture and a subdural hematoma, after doctors removed him from life support. The remaining 2 siblings went immediately into foster care, and Biannela spent the next 2 weeks grieving and agonizing over the fates of her 4 young children. 2 weeks later, on April 1st,